They used to shove him into tables, laugh when he hit the floor, and treat him like the charity case of their elite school. Every hallway, every lunch break, every day, Malcolm was the easy target, the black kid surrounded by people who believed he would never become anything. 10 years later, those same bullies gathered again, certain he would walk in the same way he once walked out, small, defeated, forgettable. But when the sky began to tremble above their reunion, they realized the past was about to catch up with them in a way they never imagined. What made Malcolm return to the place that tried to break him? Comment and tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. Before the world ever knew his name, Malcolm was just a quiet kid trying to survive the halls of an elite institution that was never built for someone like him. His days began early, long before the other students arrived, just so he could avoid the stares, the whispers, and the heavy feeling that followed him everywhere. He came from a working-class neighborhood miles away from the polished world of his classmates, and every morning, stepping onto that campus felt like crossing into a place where he wasn't meant to exist. He focused on grades, kept to himself, and carried the weight of expectations no one else could see. Teachers praised his determination, but students used it as fuel for their cruelty. They labeled him the scholarship kid, as if those words alone defined his worth. It wasn't just teasing. It was a quiet system designed to remind him that he didn't come from their kind of world. Still, Malcolm pushed through each day. He studied late, worked part-time jobs, and dreamed silently of a future far away from those hallways. He never asked for trouble, never started conflict, never complained. He simply endured, because somewhere deep inside, he believed there had to be more to his story than surviving their insults. But even with all his effort, the memories left marks that didn't fade easily. The laughter behind his back, the lunches spent alone, and the certainty that they saw him as less, all of it stayed with him long after graduation. What his former classmates never understood was that Malcolm wasn't just trying to make it through school. He was fighting to build a life where he could stand tall without anyone deciding his limits for him. And as the years passed, that quiet determination would lead him to places none of them could have imagined. Because while they forgot him, he never forgot what they taught him about the world. As Malcolm moved through those final years of college, the pressure around him didn't let up, it intensified. The more he excelled, the more some students felt threatened by the quiet black kid who refused to fail. Their cruelty shifted from petty whispers to calculated humiliation. They made sure he felt their power in subtle ways that never left bruises but always left scars. A bumped shoulder in crowded hallways. A lunch tray accidentally knocked from his hands, laughter erupting the second he turned away. Each moment chipped at him, shaping a silent resilience he didn't yet realize he would need. There were nights Malcolm studied in near-empty libraries while his classmates slept comfortably, never questioning whether they belonged. He stayed awake not just to maintain his scholarship, but because falling behind wasn't an option for someone like him. Every assignment felt like a test of survival. Every exam was another chance to prove he deserved to be there, even when the world around him tried to convince him otherwise. But there was one moment Malcolm could never forget. One afternoon, after a long day of classes, he walked into the cafeteria hoping for a quiet meal. Instead, he walked straight into a trap. A sudden shove from behind sent him forward, his hands crashing onto a table, eyes stunned as laughter exploded around him. Food splattered, phones recorded, a crowd gathered. For a few seconds, he wasn't a student, he was entertainment. The humiliation seared itself into his memory, a reminder of how easily people could unite when mocking someone they believed powerless. That was the day Malcolm made a promise to himself. He wouldn't fight them. He wouldn't curse them. He wouldn't let their actions define his future. Instead, he would outgrow them, quietly, steadily, relentlessly. After graduation, Malcolm vanished from their world. No social media updates, no reunions, no glimpses into his life. While his classmates slipped into careers their families arranged, he took a different path. Community college first, saving every dollar. Night shifts in warehouses, side hustles, long commutes, and then an opportunity he didn't expect. A scholarship to transfer to a top university, one that valued his potential rather than questioning it. In that new environment, Malcolm finally felt space to breathe. He met people who pushed him, believed in him, and treated him as an equal. He built connections, learned skills, discovered confidence he didn't know he had. And then came the idea, small at first, just sketches and late-night notes, a software tool designed to solve a problem he personally experienced, a tool others started noticing. a tool that quietly began to spread. What started as a simple project grew into a startup. What grew into a startup became a company. One hire turned into 10, 10 turned into dozens. Late nights turned into headlines. Investors called, clients followed. Before long, Malcolm, the kid once shoved in a cafeteria, found himself leading a team that stretched across cities. His company gained traction, real traction. Success he once only imagined slowly became his reality. But success didn't erase the past, it only amplified how far he'd come from it. Then one morning, years later, an unexpected message arrived. A reunion invitation, organized by the very people who once humiliated him. What Malcolm didn't know yet was that behind the invitation was a group chat filled with bets about how he would show up, broke, desperate, unchanged. But they were wrong, so wrong, because Malcolm wasn't coming as the kid they remembered. He was returning as the man their cruelty helped create. And the moment he stepped onto that reunion ground, everything would change. The sky over the country club was calm, too calm for what was about to unfold. Guests chatted casually, unaware that the past and present were seconds away from colliding. Then a distant vibration trembled across the air. Heads turned. Glasses paused midair. Conversations fell silent. A low rumble deepened, steady and unmistakable, as a helicopter approached from beyond the tree line. At first, no one connected the sound to anything meaningful. But as the aircraft descended closer, lower, louder, undeniable, the uneasy looks began spreading through the crowd. The people who once mocked Malcolm suddenly found themselves standing still, hearts thudding, a familiar but unwelcome tension seeping into the atmosphere. Somewhere inside them, an instinct whispered that this moment wasn't random. It was intentional, and it was coming for them. The helicopter hovered before landing gently on the open field. Grass swirled violently under the weight of its blades. Phones shot into the air instantly. A few people stepped back, shielding their faces from the debris. But everyone watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief. Because deep down, even before the door opened, they knew exactly who it had to be. When Malcolm stepped out, the reaction was immediate. A wave of recognition, a shock that rippled silently across the gathering. This wasn't the quiet student they remembered, the one they shoved, overlooked, dismissed. This was someone transformed. Someone powerful, someone they never expected to rise high enough to descend from the sky. The people who once made him feel invisible now couldn't look away. Faces that once smirked at his pain now struggled to hide their panic. Memories they had buried, old cruelty, old jokes, old humiliations, surged back with the force of a tidal wave. Every ounce of arrogance they carried in school collapsed under the weight of this moment. Because the kid they mocked had become the man they could no longer outrun. And he was standing right in front of them. Malcolm walked forward with a steady calmness, but inside him a storm raged. Years of hurt, years of exclusion, years of being reminded he wasn't enough. Every step brought him closer to the people who once took pleasure in shrinking him, yet he didn't approach them with anger. He didn't need to. The truth was already sinking into their bones. His presence alone was the reckoning. The crowd parted instinctively as he moved. The ones who laughed at him now avoided his eyes. The ones who dismissed him now stumbled for explanations. The ones who bet on his failure could feel the heat of their own shame burning in their chests. And in that moment, standing in the very place that once tried to break him, Malcolm realized something powerful. He didn't come back seeking revenge. He came back as living proof of everything they said he'd never be. But this night was far from over, because the real reckoning was about to begin. As Malcolm stood among the people who once made his life unbearable, a quiet shift moved through the room. Some avoided his gaze, others stared with disbelief, and a few carried a guilt they could no longer hide. The power dynamic that ruled their school years had collapsed in an instant, not because Malcolm sought to embarrass them, but because the truth of who he became couldn't be ignored. He didn't lash out. He didn't demand apologies. He didn't need to remind anyone of the pain they caused. His entire journey, years of isolation, exhaustion, sacrifice, and determination, stood as proof of what they had never seen in him. Each step he took across that reunion floor felt like reclaiming a piece of himself they once tried to strip away. Some classmates quietly approached him, carrying the weight of old decisions. Their remorse was genuine, and Malcolm accepted it with the same calm strength he carried through his hardship. Because forgiveness wasn't about letting them off the hook, it was about freeing himself from a chapter that never deserved to control him. And when the night reached its end and Malcolm walked back toward the helicopter, the crowd watched in a silence layered with reflection. For them, it was a moment of reckoning. For him, it was closure. As the aircraft lifted into the air, Malcolm felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace, not because he proved them wrong, but because he no longer needed their validation. His worth had never belonged to them. Malcolm's story is not just one man's victory. It's a mirror held up to a larger reality in America, where countless black students walk through institutions that question their presence, ignore their pain, and underestimate their potential. His rise doesn't erase the injustice he faced, but it proves something powerful. Even in systems built to exclude, resilience can reshape destiny. But the question remains: how many young lives must be scarred before this country finally confronts the quiet racism hiding in its halls, classrooms, and communities? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs strength today. And make sure you subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more powerful stories about justice, truth, and our ongoing fight to be seen.